Okay, welcome back to the show. I have a wonderful guest today. His name is Tracy Johnson, and he comes to us all the way from the United States of America. Tracy is the founder of the Tracy Johnson Media Group, which is recognized as one of the world's leading talent coaches and consultants. With over 30 years' experience in radio programming, management, marketing, and promotion, he has inspired thousands of talented radio personalities and performers. Tracy is also the author of Mic Drop Moments and his book, Morning Radio, which has been described as the Bible personality radio, and is used for media personalities worldwide. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining me. Before we kick off, there's a couple of things that we need to mention to the audience. You earned multiple Program Director and Station of the Year awards and was named Best Radio Programmer in America by Radio Inc. magazine. Congratulations for all those.
Oh, thank you. It's been a number of years ago, back in my programming career, but yeah, it was. I was fortunate to have worked for some great companies and had some really talented people at a time when radio was investing in the talent more than they are today, and we had some great times and a lot of success.
Is it true that your love, Tracy, for radio started around 14 years of age?
Yeah, I grew up in a farming community, a small rural area in the center of the United States in Nebraska, in the middle of nowhere. And I played baseball and was pretty good at baseball. And the local hometown radio station carried our games on the air. They did the play-by-play of the games. And after one of the broadcasts, the announcer was the also the manager of the radio station interviewed me and asked me what I was going to do when I grew up. And I said, "Well, I'm going to play baseball." And he goes, "Yeah, well, what if that doesn't work out?" And I said, "Well, I'll probably talk about baseball on the radio like you do."
Right.
And so we finished the interview and he said, "Are you really interested in radio?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess." And he said, "Why don't you come in tomorrow?" And I've been in radio ever since that next day.
Fantastic. So when was your first sort of professional hired role in radio? Because you would have been learning the ropes from at 14 to a certain
I
period.
was I was hired that next
Oh,
day.
fantastic.
I went in. He was on the air in the afternoon. He said, "Come in while I'm on the air. I'll show you how it works." And he showed me everything for an hour, and then said, "All right, you've got the next hour. I'll be back in my office if you have any questions."
Fantastic. And
And
you
it
host.
just threw me out there.
Well, that's probably the best way to learn, just get into
Yeah.
it. But at 21, you hosted the morning show program that was a top rated station at, let me say, KFRX in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I was going to the University of Nebraska, and was the one of the programmers at a group of stations in Lincoln knew who I was, and we had a relationship from the past, and they were looking for someone to be have the title of operations manager and program director of their FM automated rock station. And so he said, "This guy can do it." And so I became a program director by accident at the age of 21. And then 6 months later, the company decided that the station should be live and we should switch to top 40. And so I stayed on and I was doing the morning show, and I just stumbled into the right situation at the right time.
fantastic. And now you're giving back to the up and comers, the current radio personalities, and providing your knowledge and experience to them to
I've
nurture them.
been
Is that correct?
Yeah, I've consulted all over the world for about 25 years. In fact, I've consulted a lot of stations in Australia and New Zealand and down in your part of the world back, especially in the 90s and 2000s. And I started the Tracy Johnson Media Group in 2011 and have been doing this full time ever since. And my passion has always been the talent. So I think that any competitor can come in and program music against you, and they can be faster and better with news and information. but nobody can replace the voices. They can't replace the connection that the personalities make with the audience. And sadly, in radio in general, in most parts of the world, that has taken a back seat over the past few years, and a lot of companies aren't investing in up and coming talent like I believe that they should and could to keep make radio thrive going into the future. So a lot of what I do is coaching and teaching, and also taking the things that I've learned and applying it in new ways to help the next generation of talent find their legs, find their wings, and also appreciate radio for what it is, because it's a way to reach a lot of people through broadcast that is very difficult to do over a podcast or a YouTube channel or a Twitch channel.
Yeah, because there's obviously live radio when you're on air, and you also have those mechanisms to interact with the listener. They send through a request or some radio stations a call in, and you have that connection.
Yeah, it's
Do
very
you
personal and intimate. Yes.
absolutely? So, do you think, Tracy, with the new mediums that have come on board, the podcasting, the internet radio stations, do you think that's taken something away from the traditional radio world?
Yeah, I look at it as another evolution in choice and options that the public has to consider. And it's really no different than from the day that radio first was invented, 100 years ago, where it was the only thing that you could get entertainment like this. And so, what was radio then? It was telling stories, The Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet and War of the Worlds, and it was a place that the family came together and listened together to the stories coming out of the speakers. Well, when television came along, it changed that because now they were telling stories with pictures.
Right.
And it was a different media that took away from the appeal of what radio was offering at the time. So radio had to adapt and evolve, and it became more about news. It started introducing music and live performances. And that has happened throughout history. That happened when FM came along. FM came along and the AM had to reinvent itself because it was no longer able to compete musically. And
Yeah.
then it was CDs and it's satellite radio and it's the internet coming along and podcasts and YouTube and all of it's a never-ending explosion of choice. And every time that happens, it repositions the existing media to reinvent itself. And the existing media has to adapt to that or it will fail.
Yeah. And you've got a new book that's come out called Mic Drop Moments, Unforgettable Guest Interviews. And it's basically a guide preparing and managing, performing, promoting, and delivering unforgettable interviews for podcasters and broadcasters, and streamers. So I'm assuming the book, I've gone through the book. I've got a couple of questions for you,
Sure.
some points, but it's the book itself. Is that a book you wrote to sort of have another tool, give people another tool, how to navigate the radio world?
Yeah, with so many of the broadcasters, and I also work with a few podcasters, but so many of them that I consult and coach, they will. Some of them love to have interviews. They love to have guests on, and I think that one of the reasons that they love having guests on is because it lets them be lazy. Oh,
Right.
we got a guest on. We'll just have a conversation. We'll just talk to them. I got that segment taken care of. We don't have to worry about that podcast. That show's all done. I can do that.
Yeah.
And it's boring. And then there's other times when the broadcaster, the personality, will say yes to any promoter that comes along and has a B or a C list celebrity, and they think this is the greatest thing ever. I've got a celebrity. Well, that doesn't mean they're interesting. It doesn't mean that they're entertaining. It doesn't, and there's a lot more that goes into conducting a successful interview and making it entertaining than just turning on the mic and firing off questions, the same questions that that guest has probably been asked a million times. And anybody who cares about that guest has already heard that guest answer those questions a million times. There's a lot more that goes into it to make it entertaining and to make it fit. And that's what I wanted to get across because I found myself having the same conversations with different personalities over and over and over, and it wasn't getting through. So I sat down and I decided I'm going to put all this down in a book and make it as a playbook for unforgettable moments on the air.
Yeah, and as I said, I did have a read through it. There's a couple of the things that I want to ask you about, and that stood out for me. The interview grind. So you're saying that there's a part there about the interview grind, and as you say, it's not like spinning a solo riff or bouncing quibs with a partner.
It's a dance.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I that's another mistake I hear a lot of personalities make, or a lot of podcasters make, where I've planned this out. I've thought of all the questions that I want. Sometimes they'll get AI to help them. What questions should I ask this guest? And they've got all these questions in front of them, and they're mostly thinking about what question they're going to ask next instead of listening to what the guest is saying. And if they listen to the guest, if they listen to the answer and respond, it comes off as a conversation. But so many times they get nervous or they get tight or they get anxious and they're thinking, what am I going to ask next? And they don't react in the moment. And the whole conversation comes off as flat,
yeah,
almost useless. And that's one of the reasons that I recommend that all interviews be recorded in advance, because it can be sloppy. You can, yeah,
absolutely.
because you can edit the sloppy parts out. But if the guest says something interesting, it might take you a moment to think and to respond and to reflect and to think of what I want to do with that reaction. Maybe there's a deeper story there. And you can tighten that up and make it slicker in post-production, as opposed to all to being on edge thinking about where I'm going to go with this next.
Yeah, and I know you cover also preparation in the book as well. Preparation is power, you say. Do your homework. You're only as strong as the intel behind you. So obviously I've got a podcast myself. I'm in radio, but I do listen to other podcasts and radio shows, talk shows, especially overseas, and they can tell the difference who's prepared and who hasn't prepared.
Yeah, it's interesting. I posted a video with one of the points from the book. I posted it on LinkedIn last week, and a conversation started, and it was about how it's the personality, the performer's responsibility to be prepared and to capture the audience's attention quickly, and then not let it go throughout the entire segment. And a podcaster got on and said, I double dog dare you to go into the podcast movement group on Facebook and say that most podcasters aren't prepared for their interviews and guests. And I know what the answer would be. I know what that response would be, because they think, I know how to do a podcast. I'll turn on the microphone, I'll start the tape rolling, and it'll come to me. The magic will happen. I'll find it. And it rarely happens that way. And it's like you said, you can tell the ones who are prepared and know what I want to accomplish with this. Where is this going to end up? What is the most important thing that I want to do with this interview, with this segment? And I don't know how I'm going to get there, but that's where we're going. It's kind of like if you're going on a road trip and you've got it very well planned out, where you know where you're going to stay on the first night, where we're having lunch on the next day, and you've got this very detailed schedule. Well, it's not that relaxing. It's not that fun to follow a rigid schedule like that. But at the same time, you don't go on a road trip and go get in your car and just start driving around wondering where we're going to go. You
Yeah,
have to have a destination in mind, and then you take it as it comes to you. And so there's this sweet spot of being properly prepared. Tina Fey calls it relaxed readiness. She
right.
said it's where you want to be so deeply prepared that you can respond spontaneously to anything that happens. And you don't know what's going to happen, but you're prepared for anything that might come your way. And
Yeah.
that's really where you want to be. So you can be natural, you can be authentic, you can be genuine, you can sound like it's all just off the top of your head, but you also it comes from a place of deep preparation.
Yeah, and it gives you that sense of being relaxed as well. It does come across when you're prepared, you're more relaxed and you're more engaging with your guest in your interview. But with the current world that we spoke about, radio, podcast, streaming, the attention span, Tracy, is has reduced significantly, right? And now I'm seeing with social media, it's really 1 or 2 seconds. And you cover that in your book. You call it the Big Bang Opening.
Yeah.
So you only got a few seconds to lock them in. So how can people do that, Tracy, to lock them in?
There's the concept behind the Big Bang opening is that in a lot of interviews and in a lot of parts of entertainment, they want to save the best part for last, the big grand finale. And my point is that if you don't capture attention at the beginning, nobody will be there for your grand finale.
No.
So have a good finish, but start with your best material, because if you can hook somebody very quickly on what this is about and show them the value of this, show them that this is something they're going to be interested in, you'll keep them for the entire segment, the entire interview, because you've established an expectation. I've changed my philosophy on what it means to start fast over the years. I used to buy into that. You've got to hook them in the first 6 or 7 seconds, and you're right. You got to get them right away. I've changed my philosophy on that because I hear so many entertainers who come on with that big announcement, that big statement, and it's almost like punching someone in the face.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine being at a cocktail party and there's a group of people in the corner, and you walk up and you're a stranger. You don't know anybody in that group. And you walk up and you just jump in the middle of it and you change the subject and start telling a story. They'll think
Right.
you're rude.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody behaves like that. So you wait for the right moment, shake hands, and then change the subject and introduce it. So my philosophy is you've got 2 seconds not to lose their attention.
Right.
And then you've got another 6 or 7 seconds to win their attention. So don't lose the attention first. That gives you that permission to be warm and friendly, to say hello, say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Tracy." And then segue right into a dramatic moment that you're setting the stage for what you're about to tell them.
Right. And as far as the radio world itself, I know that in Australia, which you would know, community radio is not the biggest in the radio world. Not, I mean, not the it's big, but it doesn't have the financial support as the big commercials do.
Mhm.
But in America, I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, community radio is huge there with a lot of support.
Public radio is, and
Public radio.
it's a little different than community radio. It's very in the U.S. Public radio has really grown. It's independent. It's commercial free. It's underwritten by advertisers and sponsors who can put some non-commercial messages into their quote unquote sponsorships. And it's been funded by the government, although all that funding has been removed by the current
Yeah.
administration. So they're going through a lot of the same things here, but it is very popular, and it's especially in some of the more densely populated parts of the country. It's in fact, here in San Diego, the public radio station is #1 in the market in most ratings periods.
Wow, fantastic. So when you say it's publicly funded, is that like federal funded or state based as well?
Federal funding. In some places, they have states that fund it, and then they take donations from their listeners. They'll do share-a-thons
Yeah,
and
yeah,
ask for donations.
yeah, yeah. So they got still the community feel about the radio show, but it's yeah, no, that's
Yep.
fantastic. So with the book, Tracy, what are you looking to achieve as far as anyone who's gonna who reads it? I mean, highly recommend everybody check it out, all our listeners, especially if you're in radio, podcasts, or streaming. What is the one thing out of all the stuff, because there's a lot of stuff in there, what is the one thing you would like individuals to take away from this book, the mic drop moments?
The number one thing is that interviewing is hard. Most people aren't good at it. Everyone can get better at it, but not everybody will excel at it. And for a lot of performers, they shouldn't do interviews because it's very difficult. You can't control what the other person's going to do. But as a host, as the whether you're a podcaster, the streamer, the broadcaster, it's your content and it's your job to bring the best out in that guest. And there's a lot that goes into that, a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure that goes into that to make it entertaining. Because if that guest doesn't come off as entertaining as what you could do without the guest, then the guest is a waste of your audience's time.
Right. And on that point, Tracy, I've interviewed a number of artists who are fantastic on stage and they're great artists to record. But as soon as we jump on live and I'm chatting to them, and some of them know me as friends, right? They just freeze. They just get so nervous. I can see it in their responses. Why is that?
It's because it's a different medium
Right.
and they're not in control of it. They tell the same stories on stage night after night after night, in some cases year after year after year. I've seen Paul McCartney probably a dozen times, and he still tells the same story about Eric Clapton being in the crowd one night, and it's word for word. It's almost scripted every
Mm.
time that I've seen him do that. That's a different kind of story that he's telling, and he tells it very well in concert. Now, how that doesn't mean he can be as good a storyteller in person, which he is a great storyteller in person too, but it's a different skill. Comedians are the same way. A
Yeah.
stand-up comic can get up and do a great 10-minute set at a comedy club, but if they come on with you and they don't have their jokes in front of them and they don't have the same pattern and the same timing, a lot of times they freeze and they're not nearly as engaging and as nearly as entertaining. And it's up to the host to know that about them before they decide that they want to do the interview, and also to be prepared to bring more out of them. One of the tricks that I teach is when you ask a question, when a host asks a question and the guest answers it, there's three things you can do. One is after they answer it and they stop, they're going to give you the answer that they've said a million times. Just sit there, don't respond. It's called the silence gap. And human beings are trained, we train ourselves to fill the silence gap. And if you don't talk first, they will. And that's when the walls will come down, they'll loosen up, and they'll tell you something that's more interesting. Another trick is mirroring. So if they give you a response, like when did you first learn that you were going to be a great guitarist? And they'll say, well, I was 13 years old. My dad brought home my first six string, and I picked it up, and I knew right then that that was going to be the life for me. You could say, so you knew as a teenager that you were going to be a rock star. You mirror back what they just said and leave it there, and they'll go deeper into the feeling of of what that was. Instead of asking a question, you mirror back what they just said, and they'll continue with it. Works
Yeah.
like a charm in interviews. And then the third is labeling, where you put an emotion on what they just said. I was 13 years old. My dad brought home the guitar. Wow, that is a life-changing moment for someone who is really just going through puberty. How did that make you feel?
Yeah.
And so now you're getting beyond that and you're getting into some insight from that guest, and that will usually start a conversation and their whole attitude will change. They'll loosen up.
Yeah, no, that's some great advice there, and I could see the emotional confirmation of their when you're responding in that way to them and how
Yeah.
they feel. Go, well, firstly he or she's listening to me, and then they'll come out and be more open about other stuff. So, I
Yep.
know you're pretty busy, Trace, but I want to ask you a couple more things if I can. The book Morning Radio, because I'm in morning radio, so I haven't had a chance to look at that. But when I do, what great things can I expect?
Morning Radio is a book that I wrote back in the late 80s, early 90s. I worked for Alan Burns, who's a great consultant and was a mentor to me and taught me most of what I know about programming and entertaining. And I took a lot of information from him when I left there, and I made a playbook, a lot of the things that he taught me into a playbook for my radio stations in the mid 90s. And a few months after I put this playbook out, it started showing up at other radio stations. And I got a call from a program director in Salt Lake City who said, I'm going over your playbook and I got a few questions. I said, what are you talking about? You're going over my playbook. Well, somebody had made a photocopy of it and took the playbook up to them. And I thought, if they're going to start copying this and sending it to other radio stations, I should turn it into a book.
Yeah,
So it's it's about it's written toward program directors on how to coach personalities and bring out the best in them. And that's what was behind it. It's been my whole career of building my success around two things: personalities and promotion. And I think the two go hand in hand because they work together. It's if you've got entertaining people that you can bring out the best and make them celebrities, make them stars, and then promote them properly and adequately, there's no limit to what you can do with that, regardless of what your radio format is. So that was the basis of what that was all about. And so the book is how do you do that?
Right.
How do you coach these highly volatile people who a lot of times have been doing things a certain way that needs to be adapted or changed? Or how do you get them going in the direction? How do you wrangle them? How do you reel them in without stifling their creativity? How do you turn them loose but keep them on a leash? And that's what morning radio is all about. It's what this whole game has been, and my ideas on how to be successful in it.
Fantastic. And that sort of leads us up to the final question I have now. As I said in the beginning, you're mentoring, training, consulting, supporting individuals, personalities to become what they want to become. Um, how do you go about that, and how do people get in touch with you to get your your support there?
Well, the first step is learning who they are, and this took a lot of time for me to adapt. I made a lot of mistakes when I was a young program director because I thought this is how you do it. Here's the playbook. Go execute my plays. And over a period of time, I've learned that a better way of doing that is to learn what the personality is all about, what their strengths are, what their character traits are, and then help them become the best version of that on the radio or in a podcast. And so the first step I have with all of them is to give them a very in-depth character profile. And it's a series of questions. I used to do it myself, and it took a couple of weeks and several different sessions. Now we've got it down to a science. In fact, anybody can take one for free at if they go to one of my clients is Radio Content Pro. If you go to www.radiocontentpro.com, there's a link at the top that says resources, and under that is character profile. If you click on that, you can build your own character profile by answering my 27 questions. And within a few minutes of submitting the answer to those questions, you'll get an 8 to 12 page character profile laid out with how you can use it, how you can exploit it, some things you might want to emphasize, some things you want to minimize, how you can tell stories about it, different points of friction or conflict, what will make good stories and entertaining stories that you should exploit. And it's a great roadmap to start with. And for a program director, for a manager to know those things about their personality, it helps you coach them and bring out the best parts of their personality. So that's what makes it exciting to me after so many years of doing this, is because every time I work with somebody, it's a new experience. It's a new recipe. Everybody should have a different recipe based on a lot of the same formulas, so a lot of the same best practices, but the recipe is different for every chef who is cooking up that main dish.
Yeah, because everybody's different in
Yep.
everything what they do. So, and in the work that you do, Tracy, how do you manage egos? Because there's a lot of egos in the radio business, right?
Uh, I learned many. I forget who taught me this, but they said that the art of managing talent is building them up when they're feeling down, and then bringing them back to earth when they're not.
Right.
And that's exactly what it is. I find that the best personalities are highly insecure. They're on the radio because they want people to like them. A lot of times they're on the radio or in a podcast because they're not comfortable in public, on stage or in front of a camera. They like the anonymity of being behind the microphone, but they want the attention. They crave that attention. They get their satisfaction when people come and tell them how much they love listening to them. Makes their day. When their ratings go up, when the bonus checks come out. And it's not the money that they make from it, it's the affirmation that they're good at what they do, that they matter, that people care about it. And that insecurity that they feel is a motivator, it drives them. to become popular. Well, at some point, as personalities have success, they start believing it,
Yeah.
and they stop, and that's when the ego starts to run away with it. And at that point, that's where a good manager has to give them reality checks and keep them balanced and say, you know what, remember what made you successful? So it's very, I don't know if you're an investor, but if you invest in the stock market, stocks are based on fear and greed,
Yeah.
the two extremes. Well, personalities are based on fear and ego.
Right.
Fear that I'm not going to be successful, that I'm going to fail, a fear that people won't like me is a motivator. As long as it doesn't paralyze them, it's a motivator. And on the other side, the greed side of it is ego. When that runs away with it, bad things are probably going to happen. And so you want to keep them in that middle, keep them in the middle. And it's a balancing act. It takes patience, it takes preparation, it takes understanding. A lot of times you're a counselor, a mentor, you're a cheerleader, you're a teacher, you're a coach. But if you, I found with all I've got another book called "Treat Them Like Dogs." It's
Right.
called "Treat Them Like Dogs: The Care and Feeding of High-Profile Personalities," and it's based on we got a puppy. My wife and I got a puppy about 15 years ago, and we didn't know anything about training a puppy. So we went to puppy class, and the trainer, the first session said, "We're not training your puppy. We're training you to be good puppy parents and bring up a good dog." And they said, and one of the first things they taught us is that puppies love to learn, and when puppies stop learning, they get bored. When they get bored, they do bad things.
Right.
So I took all of these lessons that I learned in puppy class and applied it to radio. And the lesson I got from that is that personalities will always overperform as long as they're learning something new. What's that next trick?
Yeah.
What do we do next? What's exciting? What makes tomorrow more interesting than today? And I think that's the manager's responsibility to bring that to them and to reward them, give them treats, reward them for the things that they do well, and also teaching them that next thing that they can do well.
Yeah.
But when they lose their motivation, when they stop responding to that, then there's not a lot that the manager can do.
Yeah. And definitely they need to keep the drive going to continue. So Trace, before I let you go, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners find you to join your programs and learn, buy your books? Where's the best way to get in touch with you?
My website is tjohnsonmediagroup.com, tjohnsonmediagroup.com. You can email me, Tracy, Tracy, at tjohnsonmediagroup.com. And if you're interested in the book we talked about tonight, Mic Drop Moments, you can go to micdropmoments.net.
Right. And you're also on LinkedIn as well for our listeners
Yeah,
out there.
Tracy
So,
Johnson on LinkedIn, yes.
yeah. So fantastic. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can speak again in the future.
Anytime, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tracy. You have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.